Rock stars, songwriters, the sidemen and women, music producers, and more join Dayna Steele each week to talk about the rock business. Slide into the booth and join the conversation. This is Dayna's Diner on Houston Radio Platinum.
One of the cool things about being in this business for so long, and only being 39, being in this business for so long, I have been so incredibly fortunate to meet so many fun people, have so many incredible experiences. And, the majority of these people come in your life and you remember them and they leave. And, maybe you hear about them every once in a while, but for the most part, not. But this guy that's on Dayna's Diner today has been in and out of my life so many times and has always made an effort, even before we had, email and cell phones and all that, has always made an effort to find me when he would come through Houston. And that is tour manager, tour Yoda, Wally Versen. Welcome to Dayna's Diner.
Hello, Dayna, and it's good to see you again. I'm chewing over the math that you just threw at me. So if you are 39 years old.
Yeah, I'm 39. That makes you 49, right?
Makes me 49, and that makes it, I think I was there at your birth. Because it seems to me that I've known you for at least 39 years. So,
at least.
So
What was the first time we met? Was it with Heart when I?
Well, since we've sort of extrapolated our thinking, we figured it had to have been Heart, because by the time I was through with Rat in 84, 85, I knew you already, and I would have only known you. I was with Heart 81 through 84, early 84, and you're also, some people exactly when you met them for the first time. I can't say that I know exactly when I met you the first time. I've just always known you. You and Houston and KLOL, were just a thing. It was probably not Queen in 1980, which is the first time.
No, because
where were you in 1980?
No, in 1980, I was the new kid on the block. The very last time Queen played Houston, they played the Summit when Freddie Mercury was still alive. And I was the new kid on the block. I could swear I was at KLOL, but I may have been at another station, but I was the new kid. So everyone else had tickets and I was the one left back at the station to do a shift. So I did not. So it wasn't Queen. But I made a list.
It had been Heart, one of the many times that I came through Houston with Heart, and we always had a record out, and we were always hustling because that was the rhythm back then. Make a record, do a tour. Make a record, do a tour.
And schmooze the radio people.
Yeah, and radio was crucial to that. And if you were working with a rock band, which I always was, it was the Holy Trinity. It was Houston, it was KLOL, and it was Dayna Steele.
Thank you. I think there were others, but I'm going to take that. Peter Frampton, Rat, Cheap Trick, Genesis. I think the last show you and I did was an REO Speedwagon show when you were through town. But Scorpions, Smithereens, the list just goes on. Am I leaving anybody out in there?
Probably. Dada, Right Said Fred. I've had one foot in both the road world and the management world since the mid 80s. So I've been a manager. I've been a tour person. It's just one of those skills, like you talking into a microphone. I mean, I know you're also an actor and a writer and all those things, but doing this thing is what you can always go back to, like breathing. Same with me. The road and I know each other intimately. And so
as a tour manager who became a manager, what lessons did you take with you as a manager that you go, wow, I never should have, as a tour manager, I never should have treated the manager that way? Or what did you take with you from tour management to management? Because it's two completely different jobs.
It's two completely different jobs, but it's one artist, and the artist, they have to meld. And I was grateful as a manager that I knew the road so well. And to me, some of the greatest managers I've worked with also knew the road intimately. And I've worked with some great managers. Charlie Brusco's my partner now. We managed Don Felder formerly of the Eagles, and Edwin McCain together. And he's Hall of Famer. He managed Leonard Skinner for 9 years. He said it was the longest 30 years of his life. Um, Tom Consolo, who I worked with REO Speedwagon for as I ran the touring operation for 13 years. Tom's the manager. He was REO's manager in their heyday, and managers that understand the road, I think, especially these days where working radio isn't as crucial and integral as it was. Working a record company isn't crucial and important as it was, but the road makes most of the money, and it's also where a lot of money can be wasted. So having the knowledge of the road, so I was grateful for it. I wish that some of the managers I worked with early, couple come to mind. One I won't they had no idea what the fuck was going on the road. I thought that was to their detriment because money was hemorrhaging, relationships were fraying. It's like, that's not good for business. The road has to be healthy, and there's so much on the road that's unhealthy.
Well, and it's interesting how things have changed, though. I would think that in this day, now it's more important than ever to do the VIPs and the meet and greets and the photo opportunities, because everybody has marketing and advertising at their fingertips, i.e. their phone, that they can then post on Instagram, they can post to Facebook, they can post to TikTok and say, wow, this was a great show. You need to go see X, Y, and Z because they were really good. And then their friend in another city is going to see that. That's how you get the word out on a tour now. So it's a little different, I would think. Backstage, you have to do all of these meet and greets and VIP
You
things.
No,
You
you
don't?
don't. And many don't, but
Wow.
many do. Uh, Many artists, and look, there's money sitting out there, and it's money. If you don't pick it up, it's just not going to be picked up. And so what happened, there's competing forces here. One is economic. So of course you can, and it's supply and demand. If a certain part of your audience wants to pay a premium to get a tchotchke and get a better seat, then they'll do it. And ticket prices now are crazy in that way, just unbelievable in that way. But you'll notice in the package, not all of them include contact with the artist, because the other competing force is what happened over COVID. COVID set the table for many artists to separate from having to shake hands and kiss cheeks, because it's germy to do those things. And some artists are great at it. I mean, Bret Michaels would meet everybody in the audience if it was feasible for him to do that. So Bret Michaels has gone one way. Other artists have gone another way. Many other artists have personally gone to the other extreme where they're not meeting any guests anymore. Doesn't mean the VIP doesn't exist, because
It just means something different.
Fancy your t-shirt, come backstage and see what goes on, maybe watch sound check and have an artist wave at you personally. But so it kind of goes, but your VIP is a big thing now. Access is an enormous thing now.
Well, and the prices are just crazy on that.
Crazy.
But because I only, but they kick us out of this diner, after a short period of time, I got to jump in to the main story I want you to tell. And as long as we've known each other and as much time as we've been around each other, how I friggin' missed this story, I don't know. And when you started telling this story and talking about the new documentary, it's called Play the Game, a jock and roll story. And it is about a group of Northwestern football players, green Midwestern kids, never been on planes, never, hanging out backstage, that sort of thing, ended up on the road with Queen. Take it away, Wally Versen. How did this start?
It's a ridiculous set of extraordinary coincidences that put truly a bunch of Northwestern football players from the 70s, elite university, horrible football program, on tour with Queen, the cutting edge, glam rock band Freddie Mercury through that same period of time is truly unbelievable. Like if I told you a bunch of Texas football players worked for ZZ Top in the 70s, you'd say, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If I told you a bunch of Alabama football players worked for Leonard Skinner in the 70s,
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense. This makes no sense. Absolutely none. And yet, that's what happened. And a long story short, that's why the documentary. Uh, there was a guy by the name of Terry Cullen, had a company called RTM Security. He worked out of Chicago and Milwaukee, and he had some big time rock and roll experience. He had worked with Jefferson Airplane, he had worked with Led Zeppelin. And when Queen did their first headline tour, proper big theaters and arenas in 1977, they hired Terry based on his reputation. He was also a bit of a professor in that security back then was either cops, ex-military, or motorcycle gangs. It was tough thugs. It was adversarial. Terry had an idea that he wanted big but smart guys. So he would recruit his staff out of football programs in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Madison, University of Wisconsin. University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Northwestern. So that's how he came upon Northwestern football players, including Paul Korzelius, who was at Northwestern 4 years before me. Paul worked a lot of shows for Terry. After graduation, went to work for Terry full time. And Queen hires Terry. Terry runs a company. Terry makes this deal with Queen. All right, I'll do the first 2 weeks, but I'm running a company. Then my young associate will come out for 2 weeks. Well, you know better than anyone, chemistry in the rock and roll world. It's love at first sight, but the opposite of love at first sight is, deploring at first sight.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you and I love each other. We could have just as easily annoyed the shit out of each other in 1983.
I'm sure I did that at some point,
but by that time, we already loved you. There was not good chemistry between Terry and Queen, but they loved the young kid, the 22-year-old hulking Paul Korzelius, who came out. And so they got rid of Terry, kept Paul. Paul worked for almost 3 years with Queen as the head of security, went to work for Cheap Trick as tour manager. And I had shown up at Northwestern 4 years later, started to do shows for Terry, but became friends with Paul. And Paul got Queen to hire me. So 22 years old in 1980, I was the head of security for Queen. Paul had brought two teammates out with him at various times. I brought two teammates out with me. And that's how it started. That's how we all start somewhere. It's like I drifted into the music business on the coattails of Paul Korzelius and somewhat Terry Cullen. And now 39 years later and counting, I'm sitting talking to my dear friend Dayna. So I made a career of it.
You made a great comment that you were a group of pretty green Midwestern, kids. Yeah, you were, big hulking football players, but you were 21, 22 years old. You've never been on, some of you have never been, maybe all of you, never been on an airplane, never thought you'd met a gay person, especially a Freddie Mercury. So what was all that like the first few years on the road with Queen?
It takes being strangers in a strange land to a different level. I'd worked a bunch of concerts in college and had done just a couple, 3 or 4 week tour with Supertramp, but we didn't have anything to do with the band. We were doing stadium security at the end of the Breakfast in America tour in Canada. They were playing stadiums, had never played stadiums before. So Paul had prepped us. But you remember as a kid watching Wizard of Oz for the first time, when Dorothy got bonked on the head and the movie turns into color, and all of a sudden there's fucking munchkins and fairies and wizards. That's what it was like. we got off the plane in June of 1980, and we were in Oz. And it was insane. The first 3 weeks, I mean, we joke now, the documentary is going to tell the story, but it also tells lots of other parts of the story. But just taking the 3 weeks that me and my associate Mike Fiedler, who was my teammate at Northwestern, all Big Ten football player, green as the Jolly Green Giant. The first 3 weeks we were on the West Coast with the band. Every single day something happened that made our jaws drop, that made us go, "What was that?" Crazy stuff. From we hung out, didn't just meet. We met the guys in Queen. We met Rod Stewart. We hung out with the guys in the Who. We saw Entwistle chase a girl around, with his pants around his ankles. We hung out at studio all night with Rod Stewart. We met movie stars, porn stars, played shows at the Forum, wrecked the car. One of us got pickpocketed. One of us got rolled. We almost got arrested at the border. We almost got fired on our first show. This is all in the first 8 days of being with the band. And we had to hang on for dear life because our job was to take care of these guys. Like, okay, kid, here are the keys. It was insane. And I loved every single minute of it. And I stayed. I did the American tour. Mike went back to another job. I did 2 years with Queen, and that led to all the other good things that have come to my career here,
And
including
how
my
did you
friendship with
become, if anyone has been fortunate enough to see Queen in those years, they remember Darth Vader.
Correct.
We are
I was
speaking to Darth Vader.
You are. There were three. If you're a Queen historian and you're all madly Googling this now, there were three Supermen. Two of them were former Northwestern football players, and for a brief period of time at the end of 1979, Queen did a 3-week tour just in the UK, and they had an English guy work for them, Alan Robertson. So you will see pictures of him. So Paul had said to me in this meeting where he's prepping me about how this is all going to go, he said, they'll probably ask you to do Superman. So, be prepared. Well, I was prepared. And I was also a cheeky Northwestern guy. And so when Fred and Paul Prenter summoned me to the dressing room, we were on the verge of playing 4 shows at the Forum in LA at the end of the first leg of the game tour. And Fred said, we're thinking of revving up the Superman thing. Do you fancy doing that? And I said, absolutely, but hasn't that played out? And it stopped them in their tracks. And I said, why don't you change it up? I said, why don't you do Darth Vader? And Fred said, great, I love it. Find the costume. So we went back to LA. We were in Phoenix. Ironically, I live in Scottsdale. I'm looking out my door at the McDowell Mountains. And so I got back to LA and pulled out the yellow pages and found a Hollywood costume shop, asked if they had a Darth Vader costume, and they did. So I took a bunch of cash and we did it at the Forum, and Fred liked it. So we bought a costume and did it the rest of the American tour, except at the end of the American tour, it had gotten on Circus Magazine, Rolling Stone, bunch of newspapers, including the Houston Chronicle. And George Lucas sent a cease and desist, protecting his copyright, as you have to do. And couldn't do it anymore, couldn't even talk about it anymore. So I was the one and only Queen Darth Vader. And I'm guessing we didn't do it every night. There were some nights Fred's like, nah, I don't fancy doing it. So probably 20, 25 times I was part of the show listening to Fred sing "We Will Rock You" from my shoulders, which is and truly, and this is absolutely true. I can remember Fred used to punch his thigh, microphone in his left hand, fist balled up, and "We will rock you, we will rock you." He'd punch his right thigh. I could still, muscle memory, I could still feel that. Absolutely.
Favorite, sweetest, weirdest, whatever, but favorite memory of Freddie Mercury, or Fred, as you call him?
I adored Fred. I knew him as Fred. It's like everyone calls him Freddie now because he's become He's an icon now. Even the guys in the band refer to him as Freddie, but back then he was Fred to us. Um, two, two, one was my first lesson in Rockstar was from Fred, which was we were on our way to New York for the first time, and I'd never been to New York, and I was excited, and the plane was laid out. Fred, Paul Prenter, the tour director, Phoebe, Peter Freestone, the wardrobe guy, and Fred's cook, who used to be his boyfriend. They were in the front of the plane, and then the six, Brian, Roger, John, me, Mike, and Mal Ross, the assistant tour manager, straight guys in the back, gay guys in the front. They laugh about it. And so like Prenter's waving at me. It's like, okay, I'm on. What do I get to do now? And they're talking about going to see David Bowie, who was starring in The Elephant Man. And I had become sort of the useful guy. So I said, okay, what do you want me to do? Who do I call? What do you want? And Fred said, nothing until I tell you. And I said, okay, great. Tell me, and then later in that flight, I talked to Fred. Yeah, it's like the equivalent of a G5 now. It's a good sized private plane. And it was just me and Fred. And I said, he said, David knows I'm coming. He said, we're playing Madison Square Garden. He'll call me. And once he calls me to invite me, then we'll go. But you do nothing until he calls. And 2 days later, I got the call. Okay, David called Fred. So my first rock star lesson, protocol rock star. I speak two languages. I speak English and I speak rock star. I've worked starting with Fred, Ann and Nancy Wilson, Phil Collins. I've worked with some of the big, Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon, Ice Cube. Don Felder. I've worked with big rock stars. There is a protocol to how they treat each other. Peter Frampton. They finally put Pete in the Hall of Fame where he belongs. There's just a protocol of rock stars. But the sweetest story, I did the thing with Scorpions at the first Rock in Rio. And we're all staying at the same hotel in Copacabana. And I had seen Brian. I've been close with Brian May, is still a dear friend. But I'd seen all the guys. And this was 1985, winter of January of 85. And I didn't see, Fred wasn't at the pool. I'd seen all the other guys, and Paul Prenter said, come up to Fred's suite tonight. And I went up to Fred's suite that night, and he received me like a family member. There was a party going on. It wasn't the parties like they show. The movie was fantastic. But the parties with midgets, dwarfs, and ponies and strippers and all, those were publicity stunts. Those were at hotels. They were backstage. They were never at Fred's house. Now, a house full of homosexual men, yes, that happened, but there were no scene parties at Fred's house. So I get upstairs and there's just a bunch of people up there, men, a lot of men, but also women. Yeah, Fred was in a chair and he kind of shooed whoever he was sitting next to him. And I literally I remember it as the left hand of the father. And while this party was going on, I sat next to Fred and we caught up for 45 minutes. And it was exquisite. He was a beautiful, beautiful human being. And I cried when he died. I cried at the movie. My first rock star. I worked for Supertramp, but I didn't really know Rick and Roger that well. I wasn't really working for them. Fred was my first. And the first gay man I ever knew. The gay men to end all gay men. Just an amazing person. I've known a lot since then. I managed Right Said Fred, I managed Rosala, who had a big hit. And
Yeah,
we gave
but nobody like
everybody
nobody
free.
like Fred.
Nobody
All
like
right,
Fred.
I'm running out of time here. Tell me real quick, the documentaries Play the Game, a jock and roll story. It is still in development stages. What's
It'll
next with the documentary?
we've got investment. We could always use more. These things are very expensive, but we have an investment. We're doing more filming. Just last week, the story's about the magic carpet ride that we all went on. Magic carpets don't have steering wheels. Magic carpets, you get on and it takes you where it wants to take you. And so not only the six of us, but our football teammates, there were a couple hundred of us between all the classes. We had a unique experience. Some of us had this crazy thing happen in the middle, but there's also aftermath. We played a brutal sport at a very brutal time. So just last week, we interviewed Dr. Julian Bales, who is, if you watch the movie Concussion with Will Smith, Bales is played by Alec Baldwin. He was the Pittsburgh Steelers doctor. We interviewed Chris Nowinski, who's the head of the Concussion Legacy Foundation and the Boston University Brain Bank, about some of the issues that we deal with as we get older with our brains. But it's a movie. It'll be out next year for sure. But these kind of things, if Netflix buys it soon, it'll be out sooner. If we have to take it to film festivals, it'll be out later. And it's just a story about a brotherhood of people who went on an incredible magic carpet ride. And we're still close now, and all these crazy things bonded us. But it will be out soon.
You've been listening to Dayna's Diner, a weekly conversation with the men and women who created your favorite classic hits. Dayna's Diner is produced by Dayna Steele and Houston Radio Platinum.